From the headquarters of Telesat English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South, and I'm Emike Omoli. Welcome. The Senate in Argentina has given the go-ahead for raids on the homes of former President Cristina Fernandez de Kirchner. Senator Fernandez de Kirchner is being investigated for corruption, although she has denied the accusations. She has voted in favor of the raids. The former president has been linked to a corruption network built during her terms in office. Fernandez says she is the target of political persecution.
If something was missing to consecrate the political persecution and the use of the judicial power as an instrument of political persecution in Argentina, it was this lawsuit.
Meanwhile, supporters have gathered outside her home to reject the accusations. They say the investigation aims to destroy her career and is being used as a smokescreen to cover up the current economic crisis. So far, more than a dozen businessmen and former officials have been arrested for their alleged involvement. The IMF has finished its visit to Argentina. It has made changes to a standby agreement signed by Mauricio Macri's government.
The International Monetary Fund deepening the neoliberal politics of the Cambiemos Alliance's government. As days go by, the measures showcase even more the adjustment politics that the government is implementing.
Since we welcomed the International Monetary Fund, the government does not govern. It gave up its power. Mauricio Macri is a puppet of the imperial power. The current accusations against former Kirchner officials is a strategy on the part of the CIA, with local intelligence services, along with newspapers like La Nación, trying to distract people.
In the midst of the economic crisis, the $50 billion credit line now forces adjustments of the economy. These guidelines must then be followed so the country meets the goals set by the IMF.
The IMF are going to impose conditions like labor reform and more fiscal adjustments. We all know how this is going to end, just like the crisis of '89 or the worst economic crisis in 2011.
During the visit of the IMF's technical team, Macri's administration sought to temporarily improve elements of the economy, but failed at doing that.
There's no productivity in the country. Our economy continues to worsen, and it seems that Macri lives in another world. He came out and said that nothing is wrong, and that's a lie. Workers lose every time.
To comply with the agreed-upon goals, Argentina must adhere to severe adjustments worth over $19 billion. They include cuts on retirement funds, public works, and subsidies. The return of the IMF is an experience that people in Argentina have experienced before, and everything indicates that social tensions will only worsen.
Venezuelans are getting ready to benefit from the economic transformation pushed by the government. In a televised address, President Nicolas Maduro said people will enjoy the cheapest fuel in the world and new prices for 25 commodities.
We have set the prices of 25 commodities. The first of the basic commodities will go up to 50 and beyond. These prices are for the people to enforce. The working class must go out in the streets as judges and to enforce these prices. Everyone will enjoy our subsidy. Venezuela will continue to have the cheapest gasoline in the world, but we will not give it anymore to the Colombian mafias. They will have the most expensive gasoline in the world.
Well, members of social and political movements have held a march in support of those new plans.
Since early in the morning, people started gathering at the center of Caracas to voice their support for the economic measures. They say they are hopeful that the new economic policies will bring positive change.
We are gathered here with joy and above all with the will to back these measures, to defend this program, and we are taking to the streets in celebration, along with the people and the institutions, to protect this reform.
People are showing off their new sovereign boulevards. They denounce the economic sanctions on Venezuela and believe this new monetary reform will set them free.
The youth has long played an important role in the Bolivarian Revolution. Today we are at the forefront and we will battle to support all the economic measures of President Maduro.
As people headed to Miraflores Palace, the Vice President of Economic Affairs made new announcements.
We just had a very important meeting with businessmen from the national agro industry. We have signed an accord with them to strengthen productivity and protect the stability of prices from across the country.
Agroindustrias más grandes y productivas de Venezuela.
As the Venezuelan economy takes a path to recovery, opposition groups continue to paralyze the country for their own interests, with little support.
Analysts in Brazil say their currency is tumbling amidst electoral uncertainty. The real has dropped its value, surpassing the threshold of 4 reals for a dollar for the first time since March 2016. Former President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva is currently leading the polls, but his candidacy is in doubt as he is serving 12 years in prison for corruption. Economists say trust in the economy has declined as October's election approaches.
We have a cast of candidates for who we don't have a clear idea of the electorate. This vagueness makes the investors doubt about the evolution of the economy. There is a lot of uncertainty about the capacity of next government to do what we call the fiscal adjustments.
An indigenous woman is running for office for the first time. Her historic campaign is revealing just how unprecedented or underrepresented, indigenous people are in Brazilian politics.
Sônia Guajajara is running for the vice presidency of Brazil, but she's not like any other candidate. She is the first indigenous woman ever on the ballot. She is running alongside Guilherme Boulos from the Party of Socialism and Freedom. Guajajara heads numerous indigenous organizations and is also a mother of 3. She believes it's time for people like her to have a space and a voice in the government.
If we wait for others to do the job for us, we won't get anything because our representatives have different priorities. So we can't expect things to get better. We can't expect things to be different for us if the representatives are always the same people.
Sonia's running is shedding a light on the lack of representation of indigenous people in Brazil's politics. In fact, only one indigenous man has ever been a member of the National Congress, and that was in the 80s. This year, there are 131 native candidates running for governor, senator, and for Congress. A record number, but unlikely prospects for the vote. Débora Duprá, a Brazilian jurist, says indigenous people continue to be marginalized in all aspects of society, not only in politics, but also in schools, universities and industries.
There's a generalized view that indigenous persons belong in the woods, and that's racism. We are still a racist society, refusing to accept that indigenous, black people, LGBT, women are individuals with full rights.
2017 was one of the worst years for indigenous rights in Brazil, a record number of killings related to land conflicts, and the worst precedent regarding land demarcation policies. Guajajara and Boulos both intend to fight for the rights of indigenous communities, and their electoral bid is already historic and important for the almost 900,000 indigenous people in Brazil. Mialberti, Telesur, São Paulo.
Nicaraguans are celebrating 40 years since the National Palace takeover, a turning point to overthrow dictator Anastasio Somoza. Thousands have gathered to commemorate the day, with President Daniel Ortega leading the celebrations. He has once again called for peace after a 5-month political crisis. At least 265 people have been killed in protests, according to official figures.
There are always those traitors.
Even Christ had Judas. The Judases and the traitors are going on their knees to the United States, to Washington, to beg the empire to punish Nicaragua, thinking that with this, the people are going to surrender or they will sell themselves. When economic sanctions are applied to Nicaragua, the ones who suffer are the people. The people are the ones who suffer. And since then, they have been calling for sanctions against Nicaragua.
Time now for a short break. More news in a minute.
Infested by inequalities, abuse of power, and injustice, the American journalist Abby Martin covers the struggle for fundamental rights worldwide, deep into the search of files which uncover the empire's strategies, through our screen and web platform in English. The Empire Files with Abby Martin. Tuesday, only on Telesur. An occasion to enjoy the cultural diversity that defines our South American essence. Come along to find out the story behind these personalities, traditions, and artistic expressions that unite us as a whole. Real Lives. Saturdays, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. The family of murdered Honduran activist Berta Cáceres has denounced failures in the police investigation. Relatives say much of the evidence found was never examined. Cáceres' daughter added that the attorneys did not provide information on the case despite court orders. A new hearing is due to begin this Thursday.
Just before the trial for the assassination of activist Berta Cáceres begins, one of her daughters, accompanied by social leaders, said that she has been denied access to information about the details of the investigation of the assassination of her mother.
This process has developed among great irregularities in the investigation managed by the public ministry that has monopolized the investigation and denied malfeasance in the process, but refusing to let us know what theories are being used and the information that supports the investigations. However, we have always unanimously built theories to determine the individual responsibility of each person.
The trial for the death of the human rights defender Berta Cáceres will occur in September, but the public ministry refuses to give information about the development and investigation prior to the confirmation of what evidence will be used against the accused.
People linked to the Honduran army and energy companies are the cause of the manipulation of access to information, which have been denied 36 times in the case. The public ministry has also 4 outstanding judicial errors. The Honduran courts have ordered the dissemination of information, but it has continually been repudiated. Meanwhile, insensible excuses are being communicated.
For human rights organizations in Guatemala, it is worrying that an emblematic case is being handled with irregularities. The activist groups fear that the death of Berta Cáceres will remain in impunity and that the trend of not probing the murders of human rights defenders and indigenous leaders that has been unleashed in the past weeks will be followed.
Entonces creo que nuestra preocupación es eso, es el número de personas.
Then I think that is our concern, the number of human rights defenders. This year we have seen 19 murders. Many of those correspond to people who were part of the indigenous communities defending their territory and natural resources.
Territorio y los bienes naturales que les pertenecen.
Activists say the Berta Cáceres case is not only a symbol of the regional struggles in defense of indigenous territories, but is also recurrent in other areas, such as the assassination of those who defend natural resources and lead resistance movements.
Students and union workers in Argentina have hit the streets of La Plata again to reject the government's austerity plans. A provincial strike has been declared to ensure workers' participation. Police officers have suppressed the protests with rubber bullets and tear gas. At least 15 people were injured and 5 were detained in the violence on Tuesday. Our correspondent Edgardo Esteban has more details.
A new wave of violent repression by security forces against protesters. This time against the mobilization at La Plata City, in Buenos Aires, in which the workers of the Rio Santiago shipyard protested against the closing of this very important plant for the construction of ships in Argentina. This mobilization came after the ignored complaints made by the workers to Buenos Aires' governor María Eugenia Vidal, and ended up in clashes with the police. Many people were injured by rubber bullets and even police cars. Some people were arrested. The reason that workers remained outside the Buenos Aires governor's office asking for explanations. All this took place only a few meters from the place in which the funeral of Chicha Mariani was taking place. She was one of the founder grandmothers of Plaza de Mayo. The events have been rejected by some human rights groups. This is part of the difficult situation lived every day in Argentina, and comes as a response against the repressive neoliberal policies applied by Mauricio Macri, and today by the Buenos Aires governor, to prevent people from protesting against layoffs and social inequality.
Edgardo Esteban reporting there. The United Nations Special Commission on Drugs has published a report on coca cultivation in Bolivia. Our correspondent Freddy Morales has the story.
The report from the United Nations Office on Drug and Crime says that there has been an increase in coca cultivation in Bolivia in the last year.
Between 2016 and 2017, the coca cultivation has seen an increase of 1,400, from 23,100 to 24,500 hectares. That means a 6% increase.
But the government has said despite the increase, this report confirms that everything is under control.
Even though the prices have increased, the market is still manageable. Fortunately, in Bolivia, this price rise has not led to overproduction.
The report highlights the situation in Bolivia and compared it with other coca-producing nations in the region.
If we compare the statistics in other countries, for example in Colombia, the crop cultivation area has increased from 146,000 to 214,000 hectares. Comparing to Bolivia, these numbers are incomparable.
The law in Bolivia recognizes 22,000 hectares of land used for coca cultivation, legal for traditional use. In 2009, the United States Drug Enforcement Administration was expelled from the country from meddling in internal affairs, to make sure there is no external interference in the fight against drug trafficking in the country.
The Peruvian Air Force has deployed drones and aircrafts to monitor illegal mining in the Amazon. More than 20,000 pictures have shown environmental damage caused by illegal mining and logging. These images will be sent to the prosecutor's office and the ministries responsible for environmental protection. Argentina and Chile have signed a new energy agreement on the free trade of oil and other energy sources. The accord will resume oil exports from Argentina after a decade. Presidents Mauricio Macri and Sebastián Piñera met in Chile's capital Santiago to finalize the agreement. Ministers from both countries also met to sign on education, cooperation and justice. Ecuador has rolled out new economic measures, including slashing of state institutions and a gasoline price hike.
President Lenin Moreno confirmed that a number of state institutions will be eliminated, leaving just 20 ministries. The government also confirmed the increase in the price of premium fuel.
The subsidies must benefit those who have less and not those who have. That is why we are aiming for super petrol, which is linked to a segment of the population that has high-end vehicles and can absorb this update on the price.
According to the government, fuel subsidies cost Ecuador more than $3 billion. This is why a national dialogue will take place. However, several social groups have rejected this measure. This is concern about the future of small farming companies.
We reject the measures adopted by the government and the increase of fuel. These are recipes of the International Monetary Fund that affect the poorest directly.
On the other hand, the economic measures are triggering mixed reactions from the Ecuadorian people.
I believe that it is a negative measure for the country. The president says that it will not affect the lower class, but it even affects the medium class. Because when the petrol is increased, costs of transport and food also increases, and this affects everyone.
The government also says that it has uncovered corruption in Panama and the US, and is working to return the money to the country. According to the government, this will bring more than $1,000 million per year in savings. Denise Herrera, Telesur, Ecuador.
Mexican wrestlers have taken a break from fighting to go and pay homage to the Virgin of Guadalupe. Dozens of colorfully dressed and masked wrestlers made a pilgrimage to the famed basilica in Mexico City. They thanked the Virgin for their fans and work that they are able to do. Lucha Libre, Spanish for free fighting, is one of the country's most popular sports. The Virgin of Guadalupe is the patron saint of Mexico, revered in Latin America. Music and dance has engulfed Cuba's capital, Havana. Havana Carnival is in full swing as the city approaches its 500 years. A parade in the city's Malecon has marked the beginning of the festivity that will last until next Tuesday. The celebration has its origin in the colonial era when masters granted their slaves a free day known as the Day of Kings. But some historians add that it also comes from the African drums that were heard in Cuba in the 16th century during certain holidays. People are celebrating International Day for Remembrance of the Slave Trade Abolition. This day commemorates the millions of victims of slave trade between Africa, Europe, North and South America and the Caribbean. Bolivian President Evo Morales has paid tribute to the victims and has praised the bravery of the people who fought the trade. He has also urged us not to forget this tragic past and not to become slaves of capitalism. Stay with us. We'll be back right after this break.
Enjoy our programming from Monday to Friday, where you'll find the best information on innovation, conservation, human well-being, and human rights. Keep up to date on the latest innovations in science and technology with Atomun. The habits and knowledge you need to live a healthy lifestyle are on Guide Your Body. Environmental consciousness is required to preserve our Earth. Undergo your transformation on Green Zone. We defend the struggles of peoples in resistance fighting for their rights. Between Borders. All about equity, diversity, and respect for identity on By Gender. Every day we feature a wide variety of content. Only on Telesur, the news source from Latin America and the Caribbean.
Welcome back. A fatal stabbing has taken place on the streets of Paris. Here's more on that and a look at some other stories from around the world.
2 people have been killed and 1 seriously wounded in a knife attack in Paris, France. The 2 casualties are said to be the mother and sister of the assailant, who was later shot dead by police. Islamic State has claimed responsibility but provided no evidence. The incident is under investigation. Former pop star turned politician and critic of the Ugandan government, Bobi Wine, has been charged with treason. Wine was previously detained along with others ahead of a by-election which saw tensions rise, leading to protests. Supporters and lawyers of Wine say he was assaulted while in detention.
What have we done? They are here telling us we are taking orders from above. From who above? That is the very order they used when they damaged Bobi Wine. Bobi Wine was damaged beyond recognition. The president is there telling us that Bobi Wine shot his vehicle with bullets. When?
The South African government has strongly rejected President Donald Trump's claims about large-scale killing and land being seized from white farmers. A spokesman for the South African government dismissed his comments as narrow and a reminder of their colonial past. The country is in the process of making farming reforms to address racial inequalities, as white farmers own the majority of land.
A Zimbabwean constitutional court hearing the case of contested presidential elections that took place last month has adjourned. The case filed by opposition leader Nelson Chamisa of the MDC alliance accused the ruling ZANU-PF of electoral fraud. He argues that the results were doctored and therefore should be thrown out. The court heard 8 hours of testimony and is expected to give its verdict on Friday, which will be final. And we've come to the end of this news brief. These and many other stories, find them on our website at telesurtv.net/English. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter and Instagram for Telesur English. I'm Emeka Omolu and thank you for watching.
The ruling world order has always subjugated